Welcome to Minnesota Legislative Report, the region's longest-running public affairs program. Legislative Report is a weekly review of activity at the state capitol featuring lawmakers from northeastern Minnesota. Most importantly, it's an opportunity for viewers to call or email their legislative questions and have them answered live on the air. Minnesota Legislative Report starts now.
Hello and welcome to a new season of Minnesota Legislative Report. I'm your host, WDSC News and Public Affairs producer Greg Grell. Today's show marks the start of the 44th season of Legislative Report. It's the longest running locally produced public affairs program in our region. Now the budget lines have been drawn and now the House and Senate are on their Easter break. They're scheduled to return to the Capitol on April 6th or 7th. This is your opportunity to call in with questions about the legislative session to the lawmakers that represent you. We have two phone numbers. Locally, you can dial 218-788-2844. If you're calling from outside of the Duluth area, use our toll-free number, which is 1-877-307-8762. When you call, a volunteer will write down your question and bring it to me here in the studio, and I'll ask it on the air. You can also send your questions in an email to mlr@wdsc.org. The phone numbers and email addresses will be on screen for much of the program, and we'll get to as many of those questions as time allows for today. And now let's introduce the panel of legislators who are here in the WDSC studio, a great group today. We'll start immediately to my left with Representative Mary Murphy, a Democrat from Hermantown. Representative Murphy, welcome.
Thank you very much.
Representative Jason Metsa, who's a Democrat from Virginia. Welcome.
Thank you, Greg.
Senator Carrie Ruud, a Republican from Breezy Point, the Brainerd Lakes area. Welcome, Senator Ruud.
Oh, thank you.
Representative Mike Sundin, who is a Democrat from Esko. Welcome, Representative Sundin.
Thanks for having us, Greg.
And Representative Erik Simonson, a Democrat from Duluth. It's good to see you again.
Thanks, Greg.
Let's get started a little bit here talking about the Easter break just came about. It was the second deadline for bills. That's an important time. Representative Murphy, maybe you can just explain why it's important that these bills make the deadline, how that process works as far as bills making it all the way into state law. You don't have to tell us the whole scheme, but why the second deadline is important?
The deadline's important because it gives us an end to new ideas that can be pushed through. Although you can, if you didn't quite make it, maybe you can try an amendment along the way on the floor of the House of Representatives or the Senate or something like that. But it narrows down the number of categories that we're going to be talking about in the rest of the session. And a bill that hasn't been heard in the policy committees and moved onto the floor agenda then are virtually dead for the season.
And Senator Ruud, as Assistant Minority Leader, you get to see a lot of those bills, at least in some form. On the Senate side, same types of deadlines and same reasons for that?
Yes, it gives us a really good focus of where we're going to go and how we're going to get to the end. And it makes us look at, make sure that all of our members have the opportunity to get the bills done that they need to have done in their districts. A lot of our bills can be political and we can agree and disagree. But at the end of the day, we have a lot of bills that are very important to our constituencies, whether it be our counties or our local small towns, bills that they need to have done. And those, we need to make sure that those are the first ones that get done and that we take care of those. And then we can work on the other bills that are more political in nature to get done or not get done. But really, for most of us, getting the bills done for our own communities is the thing that we look at with these bill deadlines, that we get those done first, our priorities.
And Senator Ruud, why don't you talk a little bit about your district, Senate District 10, maybe give viewers an idea. A portion of it is in our viewing area, and that's why you're here today. Talk about that district and what some of your priorities are for the folks in that area.
Well, thank you. I have all of Aiken County and all of Crow Wing County. It's a beautiful, beautiful area, very diverse. We have some farming and ag, and then we have a lot of tourism. I have over 624 named lakes in my district, and then I have half of Mille Lacs and the Whitefish Chain and Gull Lake and Pelican. So I'm about a third water in the district, so that's a really important priority to me. I also have probably the most people on Social Security in the state in a district. And so for me, the budget targets that came out really don't focus on the senior citizens and the long-term care. And when I talk about long-term care, I'm not just talking nursing homes. I'm talking all of the senior care, all of the home care workers and the assisted living and the nursing homes, all of that umbrella of long-term care. And I know in the one budget there was only $25 million, and that's really not enough. We need to do a better job for our seniors, and also transportation. Transportation is vital, and when we talk about transit, some folks think that's just the choo-choos in St. Paul, but transit is also very important for Greater Minnesota, that we do a good job with our small bus systems, and we have a long distance for some of our folks to get to the doctor, and so we have to make sure that that transit dollar is solid in that bill too. So those are pretty much our priorities for Greater Minnesota, is the long-term care and transportation.
And Representative Sundin, your district, you're from Esko, and you're in House District 11A, also a rural area, but it sounds like even though you two come from different political parties, many of the same issues, I would imagine, in your district.
Exactly. I couldn't agree more on the transportation issues for rural Minnesota. That's very, very important to get people to the medical services or to work or whatever their needs are. The metropolitan area is developing quite well with the bus systems and the light rail. And the sooner that component is done and we connect with a major rail line to Duluth, I think it'd be terrific. So, but there again, 11A encompasses all of Carleton County and a few townships in Pine and St. Louis County. Diverse economy. We've got manufacturing there. We've got a native reservation there that's very productive with their casino, and the organic farmers are starting to make a mark in Carleton County, and it's interesting to watch those that little industry grow.
All right, well, we've got our first question of the year from Legislative Report, and it's from Larry from Hermantown, and I think Larry's a frequent caller, so Larry, you get the first question this year. And Representative Simonson, I'll bring this question to you because you're on the correct committee. Larry's wondering, would the legislature consider a bill to freeze property taxes for senior citizens, and if not, why not?
That's a good question, and the short answer is I haven't seen any bills come through the tax committee to do just that specifically, but I do think that the tax committee, not only of this year, but of the last 2 years, is very focused on keeping property taxes reduced and as low as possible. And we do that, by investing in local government aid and county program aid, and for the first time in the last session, we invested new monies in township aid. And we think that those investments really go a long ways to helping local governments keep local property taxes low.
All right, and Representative Metsa, want to get you in there. Talk a little bit about your district. You're from Virginia, and you're from District 6B, and the district is, of course, the Iron Range. Yep. And areas around. Talk a little bit about some of the priorities for your district.
So we've had, some statewide, topics come up in terms of the sulfate standard for wild rice. That's been a main focus for the delegation, working on a solution there that fits both of our communities and our industry up there. We've recently found that issue's, and we've been saying for quite a while, the issue is a statewide issue, and the MPCA just released their designated waters list for the naturally occurring wild rice in the state, and they've got about 1,300 plus bodies of water that they've selected, and we look forward to working with them during the rulemaking process over the next few years to find something that's fair and science-driven.
So that was going to be one of my questions, Representative Metsa. I was watching a committee hearing this week, and the DNR is starting up with a new rule, or at least trying to get a new rule passed, which wouldn't set a hard limit. It would vary based on the body of water. Do you have enough knowledge to talk a little bit about what that new recommendation is?
Yeah, so essentially the formula that they'd be putting together is, we found during the course of the study that the MPCA's commissioned through the state legislature, and what they're going to do is look at all the different things that affect sulfate, and we've identified that sulfate isn't necessarily the issue in the rice for diminishing the, levels of it. So with that, what they've come up with is a formula to determine how sulfate turns into sulfide. And that depends on things like iron content, of which our area is pretty rich in, that actually stop that chemical process from happening in the sediments of the soil. So without getting too far into the weeds, so to speak, no pun intended, that's it kind of in a nutshell.
All right, and that bill is going to be heard, more committee hearings, and could progress. We don't know at this point.
Yeah, so in the House, it's already in the Omnibus Environmental Policy Committee, and that's Chair McNamara. And in the Senate, I believe it was heard Friday in Senator Marty's Committee on Environment. So.
And Senator Ruud, you serve on the Finance for Environment, Economic Development, and Agriculture Budget Division. Has that measure reached your committee yet, or have you been working on that?
No, I do believe it has to go to Senator Marty's committee first before it gets to our committees, and we have not seen it as of yet or had that conversation.
All right, we've got a question from Pat in Hermantown for Representative Sundin. Representative Sundin, you serve on the Transportation Policy and Finance Committee. The question is about the gas tax. He says at 42 cents a gallon for the gas tax, where is that money being spent and why is it not enough?
The gas tax is a dedicated revenue stream, and it goes only to highway use, highways and bridges, and that's why the gas tax is actually a dedicated source, and it's very, very dependable. It's not a popular one. There's only two things that everyone in the state of Minnesota really can agree on: is we need better roads, and we don't want to pay for them. But the gas tax is probably the best revenue stream available.
All right, and transportation is an issue that is a big one this year. Both the House and the Senate have fairly large bills, but they pay for them in different ways. Senator Ruud, maybe you can speak to the Republican plan for how they'd like to pay for the road construction?
Sure. You know, we've funded things on the gas tax for a long time. And I think it's kind of an antiquated way to fund things in that we talk about we want cars that get more miles per the gallon, we want hybrid cars, we want electric cars, so we want to continue to wean ourselves off of gasoline. And so therefore, if we fund everything we have on a gas tax, it's diminishing returns. So I think we need to think out of the box. How do we fund transportation in a manner that gets us a continuing funding and not rely on gas tax? It worked for when it was, you know, we all were thinking that we, you know, could put gas in our tanks, but we're not thinking that way now. We're thinking of more modern ways of transportation. So I think we need to look at a better way of funding. And that way for me is we have several ideas in the Senate. I've authored a couple of them, and we think, you know, if you look at transportation, everybody needs tires. Whether you have an electric car, a hybrid car, if you have a truck, whatever you have tires. So we're looking at we already tax tires. It's not a new tax, so we capture that tax and dedicate it towards transportation. Now that leaves a hole in the budget, you know, but we do have a surplus now. So I think we can figure that out. I think those types of fundings and new ways of doing things is better than relying on the old way of funding things that really is diminishing. We're not going to, you know, the cost of tires is not going to go down. The cost of auto parts is not going to go down. And so we will see a continuing larger funding and a continuing funding if we go in that way of dedicated funds. So that's the main portion. We also take some already taxing from leased vehicles, rental cars, those types of things. Anything that has to do with the automobile industry and really dedicate it towards the roads. That's who uses the roads. And so that's the focus of the House and the Senate package.
And Representative Sundin, what about the Democratic plan? Where does that differ?
It does differ. To agree with the senator for a moment, you know, the challenges of the high mileage vehicles, they are presenting a problem as far as volume of gasoline being burnt and taxable gasoline being burnt. So we do have to look at alternatives. The House GOP is making a huge mistake proposing going after general obligation bonds and general fund money to do this. It was done back in 2000, I believe, and promises were made and not kept, and the highways came up short on that deal. So when we look at alternatives, we should look at taxing the gasoline on the wholesale end, and maybe that'll smooth out that revenue stream a little bit more. There's proposals up to 16-cent per gallon tax increases. I think that's a little bit high, but I think we'll find some common ground hopefully by May 17th.
Opinions from others on the panel? Representative Murphy, transportation funding is a big issue this session.
Well, you're talking transportation funding, and we were doing that, and during the campaign, the past campaign that we just went through, we were talking about it, and so was the various groups that wanted changes and reform. But it seems to me that during this session, we've mostly been talking about funding, not a plan that will have input from all people, cities, counties, the state DOT. It's like we're using the DOT plan without any new input on what they're doing. And what we're at right now isn't enough. We don't know how many bridges there are to be fixed. We have an estimated number. But are they to be fixed now, or are they to be fixed over the next 15 years? And in what order? The same with the roads. What order are we going to fix the roads? How the interstate highways, in what order are we going to fix them, and to what degree? Are we going to start from scratch and go down and rebuild, or are we going to put a new blacktop or a new cement top on it? And we have, as far as I can tell, we have not gotten into the real plan that needs to be funded by these wonderful new methods or the same old methods. And we've got to have a plan before we can ensure the people of the state of Minnesota that we have anything that will work. And that disturbs me.
I can see that. Representative Sundin, your transportation policy, would you like to see more input from the DOT? Is that a little bit, maybe the numbers are big and people want to know how that money is going to be spent exactly?
The numbers are huge, actually. You know, it's a good chunk of the state's budget. The DOT does have criteria for fixing their roads, and they actually do have their 5-year plans and 10-year plans and long-range plans. And Mary brings up the best point that there's no funding for these plans that do exist. And we need to alter the plans from time to time. We've got a crisis in Minnesota right now with the oil trains crossing county roads, state roads, and it's turning into a mess, and we have to deal with that. And it's going to take state money as well. And we're encouraging the railroads to pitch in as well. So, yes, there are plans in place, and they will be altered. And with the high mileage vehicles again, we'll be looking at mileage taxes, that type of situation to fund those needs.
Senator Ruud doesn't like that idea.
No.
Probably not.
No.
All right, well, we probably won't come to an agreement on this, but we'll probably talk about it more as the session goes on. It'll be interesting to see where that comes from. Representative Murphy, Jim from Hermantown has a question for you, and I think Representative Simonson might want to follow up. It's a tax question, and Jim is wondering, could state sales tax be used to supplement or replace property taxes? I guess anything could happen, right? But would the state be interested in something like that?
Well, the state has a sales tax, and they're using it for all the things that we're talking about. It goes into the general fund. The property taxes, we have to remember, Jim and Larry both, you have to remember that property taxes are what the local city and county and school districts impose. The state does not. The state's part in the property taxes is to give local government aid and pay for state functions so that the locals don't have to do that. And the local government, for their purposes, impose the local property tax, and that's divided between the school district, the county, and the city. And in Hermantown, the city gets the smallest part, the county gets the biggest part, and the school district gets a little bit.
Representative Sundin?
Just a reminder that there is a sales tax imposed by a few of the counties for transportation uses only, and when they vote on that at the county board level, they have to specify the projects that they're going to address with that sales tax. I believe there's 7 counties that are taking advantage
Is that
of
the wheelage tax? Is it?
Yeah.
Representative Simonson?
Right, there's a wheelage tax, and then there's also a general sales tax that a few of the counties have imposed. St. Louis County, for example, does have the sales tax in place to partially fund transportation, but they did not pass the wheelage tax.
Has there ever any talk? I know some states do not have, I shouldn't say, they don't have income taxes where I was going, but the sales tax to change how property taxes, that would have to be a local sales tax then, correct?
It would have to be, and the issue is, you know, each jurisdiction, whether it be a city or a township or a county or a school district, has different makeup of retail sales within their jurisdiction. So that would be an extraordinary effort on behalf of the state, I think, to try to manage that on a statewide basis. So the short answer is no, we really haven't talked about that.
And it's, to go back, it's to Jim's question, it's a matter of fairness. Some communities, some local taxing districts don't have businesses that they could impose a sales tax on. And so what would they do?
Right, it's communities with many manufacturers, many businesses would obviously have an advantage over some, and that is a discrepancy we have in rural Minnesota compared to the metro area. The tax base is so different. So, Representative Metsa?
Yeah, that's I think, you know, right to Mary's point that the IRRB, for example, we collect a production tax in lieu of local property taxes for the mining companies. And that operates much like a county or a city in dispersing the formula out. So,
an issue that has gotten a lot of attention in the past couple of years is the issue of funding broadband infrastructure in rural Minnesota. And Senator Ruud, maybe I'll start with you on this. What's happening right now in the legislature? Is that a push? I've heard upwards of maybe $100 million maybe spent in rural Minnesota to increase access to high-speed broadband internet.
Yeah, it's something that we work on quite a bit. I think my district just got a $2 million grant to help. I think one of the things it's really important for me to make sure the money goes to areas that are not served versus underserved. We have a lot of folks that want better, faster, more, where we have some that have no service. And so when we talk about putting grants in and getting people service, I think it's important to get the not served people first. And I also think it's important that municipalities not get into the business of broadband. We want to help the companies that do that as their business to be the ones that get the grants that further that, and not have municipalities get into the broadband business. So those are two really important factors as we go forward.
All right, Representative Simonson.
To that point, so I carried this bill in the last session, and during the last session we appropriated $20 million for a grant program to start essentially building out our broadband system across the state. And I know Representative Metsa and I have had many conversations about this unserved versus underserved, and I get the point about, you know, bringing the internet access to those that don't have, because it's just this incredible tool, and if they have access to it, it's really powerful. But the reality is, if we only have $20 million to invest in about, you know, somewhere between a $1 and $3 billion project, sometimes it makes more sense to invest those dollars in areas that provide us the best return on our investment. In other words, looking at economic development and what we can do to improve the service to our existing businesses. So I don't want to lose sight of the underserved group either as we move forward with this. But we have a bill. I know we passed. We had a bill in the Jobs Committee in the House this year, and I think it's sitting there with $180 million in it right now. Of course, that's not what will come out of that, but I think that, you know, on either side of the aisle, we recognize it as a problem for Minnesota, and it's something that we do need to work on going forward.
And Senator Ruud?
I just want to make one more comment on that also. You know, I'm a little older than these guys, so I'm from the generation that I had a party line telephone, and I was number 8 on the ring, and we had just put copper to the house, and we thought that was like the end all of technology. And so as we go and spend millions and millions of dollars on broadband, I think we need to keep sight of the fact that this will not be the last technology that we have. And we could be looking in 5 years to say that broadband is obsolete already, and we've spent millions of dollars trying to do this. So I think we need to really go cautiously, because this will not be the end all of technology. We are this age is moving so fast that I think we need to really be cautious on how much we spend and how fast we go on that.
Representative Simonson?
And I think Senator is right. We do have to be cautious in how we do that. And that's why we crafted the bill the way that we did. And we said that these grants are to be used for middle mile and last mile infrastructure. And any infrastructure that you use under the grant program has to be scalable to 100 megabytes per second, which is far greater than the foreseeable future for any of us. So we think that we set something up that'll work well into the future, but we also know that it's going to change in the future.
And Representative Metsa?
I just wanted to add, for Minnesotans out there wondering, I think the broadband program we did have was wildly successful, and it did, kind of capture the essence of what Erik was talking about, and Carrie. And so it's something I think we can all look at and say the $20 million was well invested and reached the areas it needed to, and we got a little more work to do in finding a number to sit on, but I think it's a bipartisan effort now to make sure we get more money in the pot for broadband.
And Representative Sundin?
Well, I think it's a good time to remind people that about 100 years ago, or 80 years ago, we were looking at the rural electrification of Minnesota, and this is the technology of the day, and it turned out to be a pretty darn good thing, and there's a lot of public investment in that, and to shorten opportunities for people just because they live a little bit further out in rural areas, I think that's a bad approach. I think we should work for total connection with all the communities.
All right, we have another question from Gary in Cloquet, and everybody's got a question about the $2 billion surplus. Gary's wondering why not refund the surplus to taxpayers. Representative Simonson, I'll let you start on that one, and let everybody have a shot at this.
Well, there's a number of reasons why. First and foremost is we don't really have a $2 billion surplus. If you factor in inflation into the next biennium, you're probably looking somewhere in the neighborhood of $1 billion surplus, maybe a little bit less. Beyond that, everybody's got investments that they want to make. We're talking about transportation, we're talking about economic development, we're talking about jobs, we're talking about health and human services, public safety. Any one of those departments or areas have wants and needs that I think most of Minnesotans support. So to say that we have a $2 billion surplus that we should give back, I don't agree with that. I think that we should consider inflation into the next biennium so that we're not looking at shortfalls when we come back again in 2 years. And I think that we should use a portion of the money to make smart investments, one-time investments, because this really is one-time money. And we should probably put a portion of it, in the reserves. That makes good sense to me.
Representative Sundin?
I'll agree with Erik on the balanced approach there, but just to go into a little more detail on what's actually available if you were to start dishing out refunds. In the state's checkbook, there's about $400 million right now. If it was the will of the legislature to give back, I think the number was $350 to every man, woman, and child in the state of Minnesota, we'd actually have to go out, the state would have to go out and borrow money to do it. And I understand that's what happened during the Ventura administration, and it turned into a real mess, and we ended up paying for it for years.
Senator Ruud?
I couldn't agree more. I really don't, there's not really a $2 billion surplus, and I don't think that anyone remembers what they did with their $300 check. And for my district, there's no one clamoring for the money back. They want us to invest what we have into transportation and long-term care, and to do the best we can for the state of Minnesota. And I really haven't heard no clamoring to have checks back.
Representative Metsa?
I think it's kind of an interesting, I'll agree with Senator Ruud there. We've got a House priority that's much different, though. They went out and campaigned on investing money in our elderly services, and we put a couple bills up on the floor and tried to get some of that money out with urgency. I think the costs for getting ready for the baby boomers retiring is going to be substantial, and it's clear to me around my district. I just met with some of our senior facilities on Friday, and people are getting paid less to take care of our grandparents and loved ones than they could just going to a local hospital. So these are people who truly care, And you know, I'd challenge the Minnesota House to put up a bill as soon as possible and invest in it. You know, we can keep kicking the can down the road, or we can make investments. And I think that you know, there is a true sense of urgency to get that out there, and I hope we can get that done in the next few weeks here.
Representative Murphy, last word on returning the $2 billion, so-called $2 billion surplus.
I have a lot of words. It brings up interest. You know, we're coming off of a 12-year underfunding of everything. And 2 years ago, the legislature paid off our debts. We put some money into reserve. We had a plan for a balanced budget, and we cut some of the school funding issues up to date. Higher ed, we froze tuition, and we were able to make a few small gains. And this year we came with the idea that we would continue on the strong, balanced approach that we had established in the last 2 years, and we would work from that, creating a substantial reserve for the future and being able to have complete pay for the 17-18 year, 2017-2018 appropriation years, as well as 16, 17, 15, 16, 17. The budget came out, the governor had recommendations that would continue what we were doing and make some advantages, especially for 0 to 4-year-olds in daycare and early preschool education, and had a plan for K-12 as well that would show a continued growth but not bursts of outrageousness. Everyone that came before the K-12 committee said that what the governor was proposing was not enough for their school districts to meet the needs of fiscal year 17 and 18, 16, 17 and 18. We would need at least $300 more per student for K-12 if we were going to continue on with what we currently have. Well, the governor said he was willing to go 1%. The new budget that the Republicans in the House of Representatives are offering isn't even 1%. So we're behind already, let alone spending the so-called surplus. But what's really, really scary is that the tax committee, not the K-12, the education committee, not the higher education committee, not the human services committee, not the transportation committee, not the jobs and community growth committee, but the tax committees has $2 million to spend. Now they say they're going to spend on reducing taxes or giving taxes back. One of the things they're really upset about is that in order to build that balanced budget that we had 2 years ago, the legislature voted to tax the highest tier, the highest income people in Minnesota. If this $2 billion that's in the tax committee now is spent, it's going to buy down that upper tier that we've already taxed and didn't seem to have a problem with. The K-12 people have less than anticipated to spend The higher ed people have less than anticipated to spend. Everybody that's been sitting on a finance committee has heard what they need. But you know what else that tax committee is doing? The tax committee is also hearing proposals on reform and changing things. Representative Knobloch is the chair of Ways and Means. He is proposing a bill that will take a tax deduction that people that send their kids to non-public schools have had for 70 years, the deduction for costs for sending their children to non-public school. It's been a deduction. A deduction costs more than a credit. He is proposing to the tax committee that they change that deduction into a credit now. So fewer families that are sending their kids to non-public schools, the Catholic schools predominantly, will not have as much money as they had before from their deductions on their income tax, because we're going to have tax reform as part of that $2 billion of spending that the tax committee has. I am so thankful that Representative Metsa and Representative Simonson are on the tax committee, because they have common sense and they have knowledge that's reasonable, that maybe we'll be able to say, hey, your ideas aren't so hot. Representative Garofalo has an idea that they're going to have a reform in rural Minnesota for farming. And the farming is that farmers are only going to have to pay property tax on their agricultural tax on their house and 1 acre instead of their 400-acre farms for property tax to aid the farmer community. That comes out of the $2 billion of spending that the tax committee is going to have to spend. I don't know what chance the tax committee is going to give these proposals, but it scares me to death from what I've heard in K-12 committee about what reforms are going to be considered by the tax people. And the tax people are going to be deciding K-12 funding rather than the K-12 funding will be. And that is scary.
I think this probably opens up a few more questions. We'll start with Representative Metsa.
Well, I just want to know, is this the same girl that said, I don't really have much to say today? Isn't that what we heard in the green room? I don't know what I don't really have much to say today.
Mary, Representative Murphy will always surprise you with a little wisdom. You know, I think I'll keep my answer brief here, and that's not the politician version of brief. When we go to tax things and fix things, I believe anyway, we should be looking at it to structurally maintain what we're doing. And the way that the House GOP has structured a lot of theirs is with cuts in departments and just saying, we expect, say for example, K-12, you're going to cut 15%, or Department of Transportation, cut 15% and find your savings. They aren't saying where. You know, legislating is a tough job, and I think it's our job to pick where those areas are based on the information we're given, and again, fund things so they work.
Senator Ruud?
Well, you know, we're early on in the process, and we have the budgets, or the targets just came out, and you know, everyone's got their ideas of how we should get there, and so I think it's healthy to talk about the different proposals that's going forward, what we can support, what we can't support. We have 6 weeks when we come after break. And I think it'll be our job to hash out all the different ideas that come out, what's important to us, what's not important, what can greater Minnesota go on. You know, we're kind of not so partisan in greater Minnesota. We kind of think we work well together, we work for greater Minnesota and what's best for us. And so I think we'll probably all sit down at the end of the day and say this is what works for us, and we can all go home and feel good about it in our communities. So, you know, we're going to have disagreements on the minutia of it all, but at the end of the day, I think we'll probably come out with a good package.
Well, if this panel is any indication, I think that it bodes well for the state of Minnesota, because it's good to see that type of bipartisan cooperation. I just want to mention you are watching Minnesota Legislative Report. Please call in your questions to the numbers or the email on your screen. We have about 15 minutes left in the show. And Representative Metsa, Lois from Hoyt Lakes has a question, wondering, has the legislature considered asking the mining companies to contribute money to road repairs since their heavy trucks beat up the roads so much?
Lois, yes, we have. I've actually, right now with the shape that the mining community's in, we're in a pretty rough position. We're reliant on global prices, and ore in the last year has fallen from 120 a ton down to under 60 right now, and looking like it's heading under 50. But we have looked at a few different options that would essentially allow the county to access some funding, and we're working on the policy of that right now.
All right, and we have a question from Clarence in Aurora, and this is also a transportation question. I'll ask Representative Sundin, Representative Metsa will probably have a comment, but Clarence is wondering, are there going to be high-speed rail lines on the Iron Range? And you mentioned high-speed rail, so that's why I'm giving you the question, Representative Sundin.
Didn't you author a bill to that effect?
That would not be me.
I think that would, high-speed rail in the Iron Range would be quite a ways off here. Right now, like I said earlier, we need to develop the transit system in the metro area where 3/5 of the population of the state of Minnesota reside and work, and then connect that transit system up north with high-speed rail. I'd like to see that before I die, and I'm feeling pretty good.
Representative Metsa?
I would say that, yeah, it's going to be a while before we get to invest in that. There's actually been some interesting proposals with some Chinese investors who want to build high-speed rail from Rochester to Minneapolis and St. Paul. And I think we got to explore some of those public-private partnerships, and I would guess that Duluth and St. Cloud would be connected, and Rochester kind of our cities of the first class before the Iron Range, and see how those work. And then if we can fine-tune it, get a little better, I'd be open to the idea. But we've got a lot more to invest in terms of our roads and bridges right now that I would see as a priority.
And having those types of connections would still benefit other areas who could connect to them, maybe by car or bus or another way.
Yeah, if we, Carrie and I have always kind of talked about carpooling to Duluth to catch the Northern Lights train down to the cities, and wouldn't it be nice to be able to read your committee reports without crashing on the way down? So.
And one of the other things that I think we need to really look at, and I know that this area is looking at, is our small airports as part of the transportation packet. I know that the Brainerd Regional Airport is immensely important to my district, and keeping that healthy and making sure that that's a very viable thing. You talk about carpooling. Well, I'd like to someday be able to go to the Brainerd Airport and come to session.
For a reasonable cost.
Yeah, for a reasonable cost. And so our small regional airports are really significant to us. I know St. Cloud is struggling a little bit right now to get theirs up and running, and so we need to look at that as part of the overall transportation package too.
And Representative Metsa, there's quite an investment going on right now at the Range Regional Airport in Hibbing-Chisholm.
Yep, the Representative Moline carried a great bonding bill last year, investing around $5 million in the airport there. I know Congressman Nolan was able to find some matching federal funds for both here and in Duluth, which is also making a significant investment. So,
all right, this session, Governor Dayton is calling for a bonding bill. Senator Ruud, Republican leaders don't want a bonding bill this session. What's your feeling about, will there be any money for bonding this session? Then I'll let some of the Democrats on the panel comment.
Last year was the first time that I voted for a bonding bill, because I thought that it was really necessary. We helped with the capital expenditures and the remodel and those types of things. And I think that if you put forth a bonding bill that people think is reasonable and has projects for infrastructure and for maybe transportation, I wouldn't say no to a bonding bill. I would like it to see statewide significance and not partisan projects, a person's pet project. If you put together a solid bonding bill for infrastructure for the state of Minnesota, I think that you'll get support for it.
Representative Simonson?
I think if we see a bonding bill this year, it'll be relatively small in comparison to what we did last year. But I agree. I think that what will be in there will be non-controversial things, not district-specific. You know, probably looking at. I know the House GOP wants to do some geo-bonding for transportation, and we'll see what happens with that. But there are other things that we can do too through the university and MNSCU, HEAPR funds, and things like that are always non-controversial, yet they're important.
Mm-hmm.
Representative Sundin, this goes along with that. Gary from Cloquet was asking about, is there a possibility that there would be extra money in the bonding bill for the cemetery? And maybe you know what cemetery is that the Veterans Cemetery?
I couldn't say what he's addressing there, but on the subject of cemeteries, last year I carried a bill, I believe it was last year or the year before, and that bill authorized Carleton County to levy a tax, and it was a very, very small one, to support the Sawyer Community's cemetery. And I think that actual piece of legislation is going to be used as a model throughout the state, with cremation being a more preferred way of end-of-life services. These cemeteries are going to wither away, and they're not going to be maintained correctly. So I'm thinking that maybe local communities can levy taxes to maintain their cemeteries. Otherwise, they'll just be overgrown and eventually forgotten. And that's a sorry statement to make, you know, because you've got generations of veterans buried there, and they should be respected, as well as family members.
We've got another issue happening right now at the Capitol, not necessarily legislature related, but it's the huge renovation going on at the Capitol. It's making it difficult for people to get around right now. Next year is going to be even a bigger problem, and there's been different speculation about what might happen. Let's start with you, Senator Ruud. I've heard things as much as maybe meeting in the Senate office building when that's completed so the Capitol renovation can continue. How popular that would be, or maybe having a very short session next session. What kind of options are being considered?
Well, we're looking at lots of rumors about what's to happen, but I think this panel, we're all kind of safe because we're in the state office building, and I think that if nothing happened, we'd all have our offices. But I really don't know. Right now it is really tremendously hard in the Senate. We have 2 hearing rooms available to us, and plus the room 15, which is a pretty formidable room, but really 2 working hearing rooms, and we start hearings at 8 and we go all day long. And I think it's really, for me, I worry about the public input, and we're hearing people, we're hearing testimony. When people come down to the Capitol, I think they deserve the respect to sit at that table and tell you what they want to tell you. And especially from our districts, they come from long distances, and we deserve, they deserve to be heard. And I think that we, as we work through these problems, we need to be very aware of public input, and that we make sure that we don't silence the voices in how we meet and how we conduct ourselves. So I'd like that to be our utmost priority in wherever we meet and however we figure it out. Our offices, we can all figure that out. If I spend too much time in my office, I'm not doing my job. So my office is just the trappings of the Senate, but I think that should be the priority, how we meet and how we let the public still have their voice.
Representative Sundin?
My understanding is the legislature needs to meet in St. Paul. There's no getting around that, but next year being it's a bonding year traditionally, just an idea that I've been floating around is every congressional district here in Minnesota, there's 8 of them, host 2 legislative committee hearings for capital investment. Bring the government out to the people around the state. And I know it's maybe very naive of me to think that way, but that would fulfill the needs of public input. And I think that would be a novel way of doing it, and then just have a very, very short session to approve what's done in those committees. Like I say, I may be very naive, but I think it would be serve the state well.
Representative Murphy, I know the Capitol renovations were an issue that you were very supportive of. It was necessary. What's your thought about going forward now while this Capitol renovation is ongoing?
I think it'll work out. I think the new state Senate office building will be open, and in the new Senate office building there's at least three new hearing rooms that are going to be larger than any hearing room in the Capitol at this time. And the one that's going to be the largest, I believe that the Senate is planning on using as their chamber when their chamber is blocked off, if it's blocked off during the session. And I understand that last week Senator Box said that he was pretty sure that if the House was blocked off, and that's not even a sure thing yet, if the House can't use their chamber, then we could also use that same, the largest hearing room for the Senate for that one short term.
All right, we just have about 5 minutes left, but we have quite a few more questions to get to. And one thing that we haven't talked too much about yet, Representative Metsa, is what is happening at the Capitol this year that might help the region's economy. Are there some bills being carried that have some potential for economic benefit?
Well, I've got kind of a fun one that fell into our lap. It's the NERC facility processes beef right now, poultry, swine, and vegetables. And they've been doing it since 1930 as a rehabilitative center. And Mary could probably give us a little more history on the facility, but overall, right now we're working on a bill together that would essentially add a USDA certification, upping from the state version that they have, to allow local farmers to bring their animals, livestock, and/or produce to sell to our local restaurants and grocery stores with that USDA certification, as well as training the nonviolent offenders there with a skill that would be more of a hard skill instead of the soft skills they learn there to get back out into the community. So that's one thing we're working on locally here. There's an incentive in that Representative Anzel's put together that would allow for a direct reduction pellet and basically incentivize some of our mining companies to invest in the pellets that are going into arc furnaces, which are becoming more and more used around the country.
And Senator Ruud, in your region, of course, tourism is pretty important, and I know you're concerned about transportation issues there. What about in your district?
Well, one of the things that we really didn't touch here that's big in my district especially is the Governor's Buffer Initiative, the 50-foot buffers, and we talk a lot about it. And the way I feel about this, I think that it's a great conversation that we should have, but we've been trying to do major policy in 2 weeks. And it does affect the lake countries, it affects ag, it affects mining, it affects everyone, this buffer issue. And so we have recently put together Water Commission, on which I sit. It's a bipartisan commission. It has a full-time administrator. We really don't have a purpose at this time. I mean, there's no agenda there. And I think this is a conversation that we need to have. And I would like to see that bill and that issue be given to the Water Commission so that they can do a really good job, do the inventory, do the scientific studies that are needed, and then bring it back to the legislature when you really put some time and effort into it so that then we can have the conversations about the bill. I think it's a really big lift to do major policy in 2 weeks, and it is a good initiative. It just needs to be really well thought out and well done. So I would like to encourage the governor to give that to the Water Commission so that we can do that initiative, but let's do it with the scientific facts and with all the knowledge that we need. And that's a big issue in my district.
And maybe wait for another session when there's more research has been
Do
done.
a good job on it.
Representative Simonson, 10-day Easter break right now. What types of things will lawmakers be doing? Is this a time when you're reconnecting locally and finding out what people think about some of these bills that are being carried?
I think ideally, yes. You know, we've got targets out now from both the House and the Senate, and I think that'll be a big part of the conversation because when we do go back after break, we're obviously going to see all the budget bills will start coming together and be put together. So for me, you know, we're going to want to get feedback on some of those targets and what some of the priorities are for my district.
We've got about 2 minutes left, and Representative Simonson, we have a question I'll throw to you. It's Gary in Cloquet is wondering, why not allow the city of Duluth to engage in gaming like the reservations? This is an issue that has come up before, perhaps Duluth having its own casino, maybe as a way of raising revenue for the city rather than in a different way.
You know, a wise man once told me, not to get involved in city politics as a state representative. And I took that to heart. Until the day comes where the city wants to approach us and seek that, I'm not going to touch that issue.
So right now there is no move by the city, and of course that would have to come from the city and be asked the local lawmakers to carry that. Well, you opened up the issue. There's been rumors that you might run for mayor. Are you willing to talk about that? Say whether that's a consideration for you?
Actually, I think you opened up the issue. You know, it's a great question, and right now is not the time to answer that question. I am 100% focused on this legislative session, and we'll see what happens after that.
All right, I appreciate the answer. Representative Sundin.
Just to add, the best part of Duluth politics is the fact that I live in Esko.
All right, and with that, I think we will wrap it up. I really appreciate all of you being here today. Thank you so much. That's all the time we have this week for Minnesota Legislative Report. Thanks again to all the lawmakers who took time to travel to our Duluth studio to be here. Be sure to tune in for our next show on Sunday, April 12th. We're taking next week off due to Easter. We'll be back at 5 p.m. that day for an update on the week's legislative session. The crew here at WDSE WRPT, I'm Greg Grell. Have a great evening.